So if I'm understanding correctly, it was what you wanted to do, but you did not have a receptacle for it until the need arose. So you were almost dreaming and preparing for a situation that you can be who you said you were.
Actually, we were just responding because people like Jane Payne, who was with the Danforth Foundation, knew all of us, and she was saying to us, you guys really are going to have to get involved, and you're going to have to get involved in different ways than you ever have before. And she was our inspiration for thinking about how to do that. We spent some time with the school leaders in St. Louis City, and we said we'd like to identify elementary school in the middle of an urban area where there are probably a number of kids in poverty, tough issues they're facing with gangs, with drug use. And we would like to choose that school, and we'd like to hire a person to work side by side with the school personnel, because school personnel were exhausted by this time. They had been given the responsibility for basically doing the things that we used to rely on parents and churches to do. And now the schools were being asked to do that in addition to their reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they did not feel prepared, and they felt exhausted with that effort. And so we needed to figure out where the school was that we were going to begin, and we needed to find an individual who could work side by side with the principals and the teachers and so on, and could start a new approach to the issues that the school, the parents, and communities were facing.
So how's that working? Because you're still around. What did you learn along the way?
We learned a lot of stuff along the way. Because we decided that we wouldn't be dictating, we'd be listening, we spent some time with, there were advisory boards formed in the Walbridge School, which was the first school that we went to, parents and teachers and principals and so on. We had hired a young man named Khatib Wahid, who became a legend in the area for good reason. He organized a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion around what should we do differently to try to address the issues the community is facing. And those issues were phenomenally diverse, all the way from dealing with drug houses who had sprung up in the Walbridge community and trying to see if we could figure out how to convince them they should go elsewhere, to latchkey kids who didn't have a place to go after school. So we, and many, many things in between, and we bureaucrats learned what needed to be done. We identified specific people in those 4 departments who spent a lot of time on the ground with Walbridge, and they would come back and share with us, this is what the folks think they need to do. Some of those things were exquisite, and some of those things were very mundane. I tell the story that Khatib Wahid one day called me, because Khatib would call me regularly, and he called me one day and he said, I need 6,000 hot dogs. What do you need the hot dogs for? And he said, well, Terry Pendleton's going to come for a conference for one of our big meetings, and we need to have something to feed the people, and I'd like you to get me 6,000 hot dogs, and if you could do that, we'd like to have them in a couple of days. State agencies don't buy things like that. State agencies have to bid stuff. I could have bought him 50 hot dogs and done okay with that. We had the ability to spend $200 in any place without bidding, but to buy 6,000 hot dogs was a little more difficult, so I had to talk to my chief financial officer, who was not impressed at all, and who said, well, we can't do it. And I said, well, then we have to figure out how to do that. So he wound up going to maybe 20 different stores in St. Louis, and he would spend a small amount of money in each of the stores and then bring the 6,000 hot dogs to Khatib, all within a day and a half. And those were just the kind of thing. Khatib was never bashful, so those were the things he would ask for, and we would try to respond, which bureaucracies just don't make that happen very well.
In your judgment, how did the Walbridge Caring Communities Project accomplish what you set forth to respond to and what it set forth to achieve?
Well, it met those conditions. First of all, we put a dynamic leader side by side with the schools, and I think the culture in that school, particularly Walbridge, and then other schools that came on later, I think the culture's changed The parents understandably did not trust the school when it said, well, we're going to do this thing differently. We're going to have supports for you that are not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but have to do with helping your kids if they face trauma, they see death on the streets. We're going to help them work through that and figure out what that means to them and how it works and not be so scared. This was an era of a lot of change in the country. By the time 1984 rolled around, we had 500,000 kids in foster care in this country. Quite a few of them were from Missouri as well. We had child abuse and neglect hotlines. We're getting calls all the time. And parents weren't really sure about what was being asked of them to do. I think the parents began to realize that it was for real and people were sincere, and began to work from the idea of they were to design the program, not some bureaucrat from Jefferson City, Missouri, and that was impressive. And then a lot of resources came to Walbridge and to the kids and the parents and the teaching staff, and then to the other schools that we started here in this area too. Those things just made a difference. Most of the stuff that I learned about, that I heard about, was anecdotal, meaning that somebody said, well, this happened. And that's really important, but in my world, you need to have the facts of what happened. Did the children, for instance, succeed better in school because of this issue? Were the children able to handle the pressure that comes from watching violence around them, or being involved themselves and having to be in violent situations, abuse, neglect situations, whatever. If I have one regret, I don't think we had a strong enough evaluation of the program, because I think it would have shown not only the anecdotal stories that were great, the legends that were created, but it would have shown the facts about the changes that occurred. If caring communities could be done again, Washington, WashU, or St. Louis University should have been directly involved in that program and helping with that evaluation. That's a few of the things that I regret, but the anecdotes were phenomenal. It became a movement. It was more than just another program in a school, and that made a big difference.
Tell me about how things were at the time. Describe what you were dealing with.
We were a community education center as well, meaning that we provided evening programs and activities for the community, the parents and the neighboring community. They can come in and do take GED classes, cooking classes, and different types of arts programs that we had going on there. We also provided some tutoring programs as well. And during the school day, the regular program, we just implemented our curriculum as usual and carried on the school business during the day. The community that we were in, students had some challenges in the community with the neighbors and families. And
How was that showing up for you in your hallway?
a lot of our students had issues such as mental issues, some behavior issues. Some of our students had self-esteem issues. And they would bring that to school where it would disrupt classroom learning. And we had students who would actually just really just break down and just throw tantrums and just be very disruptive in the classroom. And we did what we could on our end with our counselors, social workers, myself as the principal, assistant principals. We was providing some of the things that we felt that we could do within our experience in education, but we felt like, hey, this is not enough. We just don't have the expertise.
Or the hours in the day?
Yes, to address those serious needs as far as the mental and social needs of our students. When Mr. Kennedy had brought that to my attention about the Caring Communities program, which at the time I did hear about it because they were in the Walbridge area. And when I had an opportunity to meet and, like I said before, and actually sat down and saw, hey, wow, they're going to give us this, they're going to do this, and this is what we need. So, hey, I said, hey, let's do it. I had Khatib and Mr. King, I had them to come in a staff meeting to share the program. Naturally, the staff had a lot of questions. Mr. Wahid and Mr. King did an excellent job responding to their questions. Once I got my staff on board, at my PTO meeting, we invited parents. And also we had the parents to bring in their students. The Khatib and Mr. King shared with them the program.
How do you sell living different, living right to a young cat that's living like you understood?
I'm gonna go biblical on you for a minute. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he gets old, he won't depart from it. So that's kind of my thing, how I ended up coming back in my right mind.
You know what I mean?
Because I was out there bad. I'm gonna tell you, I don't brag about that, but I had an opportunity to see a lot of stuff.
And prevention, to say, here's what's more for you, and we understand. That makes this so significant and why we need to retell this story so we don't ever stop getting tired.
From the perspective of looking at what was the attraction, first of all, for young men to get into gangs. Let's start with this, because that's the context that you really have to start with. What is it about gangs and gang activity and gang violence and drug dealing? What about all of that is so attractive to a young boy in the city? Because most of this stuff occurs in urban areas. One part of it is acceptance. You want to be accepted in whatever peer group you're in. So if you're in like Walnut Park, for example, if you're in an area where this stuff is very prevalent, and every day you come out of your house, this is what you see, this is what you hear, you look around and there's no other alternatives. So you either got to get with the program or then you become an outsider, so to speak. And then you don't want that either, because now when you come out, they're going to be gunning for you, or at least begin to start picking on you, whatever you want to call it. And so we had to begin to look at giving these young men alternatives to doing that. So we had, one of the reasons we started at Walbridge, because it was a community ed center. There was a gym there. So we began to use that as the carrot to bring the guys in, because they're in the neighborhood, everybody want to play basketball. We bring them in, we begin to work with them, using basketball as the incentive, and then begin to start presenting them other stuff while they're playing basketball. So, then, because one thing you have to have their attention. And the only way you can get their attention, you have to have something that they can associate with that's near and dear to them. Everybody want to be in the gym playing basketball, so that's what we did. And if you was out there acting a fool, then you couldn't come in the gym and play basketball. That's kind of the perspective we came from.
You came in, you thought, this is what is going to be needed. Name some of the things where you placed the balm and the bandages and the love to even start caring communities. What was the first step?
My part was, as a student assistance coordinator, I was there to help the students. And all of the different things that they were challenged with, we looked for solutions for those. So you knew you had goals. We wanted to increase the academic excellence of the children, keep them in the school and be successful, keep them in the home where they were not challenged by all the different dangers in the neighborhood. There were three different areas where we had to address. So those areas that helped shape the program. And then, of course, you talk to the children, you talk to the teachers, you talk to the parents, you talk to the community, and they would give you things that they thought would help. And that helped to shape and guide what we were going to do with the student assistance program. So we came up with the thought of, well, let's build self-esteem by doing cultural classroom presentations. So from kindergarten on up to 5th grade, we would do at least 3 cultural classroom presentations per each room. And that was very challenging. We used a storytelling method, which has been used historically over from ages until now to involve them. So let's say this child is over there, and when I first go in, I find out who the children are who are having challenges. And then I would begin the story, and then I would call them up to help me tell the story. So they would still get attention, and they would get positive attention. And eventually it became a favorite thing to do. At first it was like they didn't want to. They didn't want to be involved. They didn't want to be up there front. But they realized the attention was just feeding them. So we did the cultural classroom presentations, and then we did after-school tutoring because academics was very low. And then we also did different programming that was culturally sound and building self-esteem. Um, it was a good program. A lot of times we look at what are the different jobs and what do we do, but we don't realize the impact of what it does to us. So imagine what feeding that did to me when I went into that program.
By the time you got to Walnut Park, caring communities, what was your role?
He looked and said, hey, this is what we're doing. We'd like to have you there. Now, we had a youth program that was called the Sima Namalaka Wachang. It was the forerunner of what they call African-centered rites of passage.
But that program was operating
At Walbridge School. And so I did the history and African studies or black studies class. And you know, it was filled with young men, and we got them going and understanding their culture and to be proud of themselves. You know, we so often think that we have not made any contributions to the world. The larger community pushes that idea. And it's not true in any shape, form, or fashion, nor does it help America, the rest of America, not to know the truth. The more they know the truth about the history, the better that they can recognize how we all have made contributions and then be able to turn to those who have made those contributions when they need more information. When you are not told the truth, then you actually end up disconnecting yourself from the wealth of resources that is at your fingertips. And so teaching that was not any way castigating or putting anybody else down, but it's making sure that those people who are of that lineage have an understanding of their contribution to the world and the importance of that contribution. So we taught that to these basketball players. And from our opinion, it helped them play basketball much better.
I was going to say, what other positive difference did you see it make? I love that we're able to take it beyond the anecdotal. How did you see that translate and change with the young people you were working with?
Many of them
started to get that value.
Exactly. I see many of them as adults today involved in things. And they actually say, you know, we got involved because of this, because of caring communities, or because of the class or the lessons that we learned there at Walbridge, or actually got involved. So typically a people who have a good sense of themselves and feel good about themselves will participate and get involved to help make change.
By that smile, I'm sure you have a few stories.
Lots of stories.
Is there one that comes to mind that turned out to be a game changer?
It was really more what was happening on a daily basis. We were fortunate enough to be able to connect with Dr. Murphy's center at Hopewell and actually bring mental health staff into the Walbridge School. It was a matter of, we can bring these staff on, how do they connect with the social services, with the health services, and with the school staff. Just having you bring an additional 4 or 5 people into a school, and where do they even sit? Where do they go? Where are they housed? Little things like that that had to be worked out.
Help us understand why this made sense and mattered through that mental health lens that you worked for and others were determined to see implemented in our school systems.
In my opinion, having services at the school was really a very good idea. Parents were trying to overcome all kinds of obstacles of transportation. Transportation ended up being one of the biggest issues that every community dealt with, whether it was a rural community or an urban community. Transportation was the single most important issue that I remember each community faced. But then there were costs, there was time off from work, there were just things like that bringing services to the school, it made it so much easier for families to try to negotiate getting those services. Bringing social services to the school made so much more sense. People didn't have to try to get on a bus. There's a social service agency in every county in the state. You have to go to them for eligibility. You have to go to them to find out where you get help from. Health services were the same way. You can go to a health center, but you have to go there. But if you just go to school, there are the services right there. It made so much sense.
When you were involved with Walbridge through Hopewell at the time?
Well, I was recruited to come to Hopewell to develop a comprehensive mental health center. And so I did that. And in the development of that center, my role was to look at the community to see what agencies did things like we were doing and what agencies I may view as foes. And so Caring Community was one of those agencies that I could see would be a friend because of what they did and how they did it. And also with what I'd heard about the staff in the program, how the patients reacted to the program. As an example, I saw a staff in the program that was enthusiastic, always glad to do what they did, really committed to wanting to help the patients and want to help them in all their walks of life, not just one thing, but a full array of services. And I also saw an enthusiastic staff that was pleased to do it, and that's kind of hard to find. It was hard to find in those days, and I think it's even harder to find today. Looking at what I thought about care, I was a nurse, so I naturally wanted to make sure that we had good health services, good mental health services, and good support services, which I call wraparound services. Seems like Caring Community was doing a lot of that, and so I saw them as a match, and we deployed many of our staff persons to the program. And the staff person that we sent to work for Caring Communities were enthusiastic about the program, even though I was scared to death, especially when they were dealing with the drug programs and the drug addicts on the street, and the drug dealers. Scared me to death, but the staff wasn't afraid. And they liked what they were doing, so I thought this is a real match.
If you were to do it again today, what would you envision your next endeavor?
I would try to be more impactful and provide more of the services to more of the people. I don't think we made the impact that needed to be made. Walbridge was the type of services that needed to be everywhere in the community, in all the schools and all of the major centers. It should be wraparound in the apartments. When kids are born, they should be taught about drugs and all of those things, and how to be appropriate, how to develop good relationships, how to get along with their parents and things of that nature.
So you would say it was successful?
So I ruminate about this work a lot, right? And yes, on one level, very successful, but I think if I were to say here in St. Louis around, we're successful in St. Louis, I'm not saying that, I'm talking about the pure community caring communities model, right? Where we're school-based, school-focused, family service, creating strong neighborhoods, creating strong leaders in neighborhoods to carry on the work at the local level. And I think on some level, our structure didn't allow for that or got in the way of that here in St. Louis. And I'm still in the process of figuring that out. Why? Because I always talk about kind of a two-layer story to this work. So there's the anecdotal story of Caring Communities, where we talk about the leaders of 3 state agencies coming together in Jefferson City, talking about how could we do business better as state agencies, how can we connect to communities, and the secret sauce that was beginning to think about Caring Communities. And then we think about, kind of where it ended up and where we are now. And there seems to be more than one story about its evolution. And so I'm always part of my work has always been to try to seek the truth in what that story is. And so I think the story of the 35-year history of caring communities in St. Louis is somewhat different than the story that's been told down the years, these three plus decades. So I always want to get at the truth of what that is.
Have you found it?
On some level, I think so. And I don't think it's ever too late to think about how those original kinds of services could still be delivered in the St. Louis region.
Any thoughts on how that could happen? Because my hope is that it could.
I know it needs to happen, right? I do think that we have developed an excellent cadre of organizations in St. Louis who are connected here, who understand that work in a way that a white guy from Jefferson City doesn't know that work, right? And I think we've done a good job of connecting some of those. I think there's a lot more that could be done around that. There's no doubt in my mind that the service delivery model that we had 35 years ago that began here in Walbridge, school-based, school-focused, child-centered, family-centered, working where the highest need is, working out from there, developing the strength of those neighborhoods was vital to the original model. It was about creating leaders or tapping into the leaders that we knew were in those neighborhoods that nobody ever really had tapped into before. So I think there's still room for that.
How did you begin to implement that, or when caring communities when you came to interact with them, what was that moment?
At first, I didn't trust him because he was somebody new in our community. And I had said to Stoney, I said, who is he? He said, Mom, I don't have no idea.
Things started to get pretty bad in the neighborhood.
Things started getting bad in the neighborhood, like Stoney said, when most of those people left. People started doing their own things, like we had more police in the community then. And then after they moved out, it was like that, hey, y'all on y'all own. So let's be real with it. And we met Mr. Wahi. He didn't only work with the children, he worked with the family. So in order to get to the children, you got to get to the family first. So we had a lot of mothers without the fathers in the home. And they had a lot of needs. And we filled a lot of needs. Mr. Wahi came in and they had social workers, psychiatrists, you name it, everything we needed. And when Mr. Wahi started caring communities, we had it on site. So the parents had to get to know that they could trust somebody. So we started Latchkey. And I got a chance to be one of the Latchkey teachers. And it was wonderful. And 6 o'clock in the morning, I would have to be at work. But I had parents that had to be at work at 6 o'clock too. So I would come to work at 5:30 in the morning so that they would have time to get to work. And they would drop the children off. And we would stay from 6 until 7:30. We'd go over and eat breakfast. We'd get the kids lined up to go to the classrooms. I would go upstairs. After I helped Miss Shaw with the lunch, go upstairs, and I would help the teachers with whatever they needed. So Mr. Wahi made sure that our parents got the help that they needed. Where they need to see the psychiatrist, the social worker, lights need to be turned back on, gas need to be turned back on. They need to have food in the house, children need to have clothes. Stoney made sure that all the children got to the doctors, made their appointments, worked with the parent. Caring communities was lost.
Is there a story you know?
Well, the difference I saw it made in caring communities is, like I say, when the program got started, you had the latchkey program. Because daycares back then, it was hard for parents to get their kids to daycare and they'd be taken care of. So latchkey was a perfect thing because they can bring their kids to school, they can drop them off, Then when the evening time comes to 6 o'clock in the evening, a lot of times the parents couldn't make it back there by 6 o'clock. So they would come over to the gym where I was at, taking care of them. Then when everybody had to leave, even when she had to leave, I would still have some of the latchkey kids, but then when it got to a certain time, I would take them to her house. I told her I'm on my way. It was no problem, because she knew that the parents knew that she was gonna take care of them. And we had the guys, like I say, when I was in the neighborhood growing up over there, and I started working at the school, you had your little Bloods and you had your little Crips guys, trying to go at each other. But see, y'all still working, y'all in the gym with me. So I told them, I said, all this going on, but I said, but you still gotta communicate with each other. We gotta be here as a team. Because I coached basketball, I coached softball, I did all that. So a lot of that stuff that was going on, I kept it separated. I tried to let them know that we here as a family, we gotta be together. So a lot of that stuff I kind of balanced out. Everything got to going, like I said, it got to a point where things had got to a point where the kids had to go home. That's why he used to have us, certain guys on each corner, making sure the kids got to their destination. And like I was telling all the guys, they would call themselves Bloods and Crips, I said, now when y'all get through, come on, we're finna go back to the gym. So we stayed at the gym till about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Everybody, the parents knew where they was at. It's time to go home, it's time to go home. So we made sure that we tried to keep them unified. Some kids gonna go their own direction no matter what.
What are some of those characteristics that helped you take that stance?
Well, first and foremost was a belief and faith in God. That was and still is my center. Not that I try to push that on others, but that's where I gain my strength. And then I would say a love for the people, and to try to have more of a selfless kind of perspective, where there's an African saying that I am we, or I am because we are. So my existence is irrelevant if it's not tied to us. So I would say that would be a second characteristic, someone who is less self-centered unless he or she sees their centeredness a part of a larger collective of people. I would say folks who were willing to work, people who were honest, willing to do the job that they were being paid to do and being asked to do. I would say people who are character that speaks to not taking advantage of the trust once it was given, but to treasure it as though it was the last diamond on the earth. People who were reliable, where you say what you mean and you mean what you say. Competence, that you're capable of doing what you said you were going to do. Third one is caring, which is always that caring community it says something. It's been my experience that the average person knows when somebody's sincere. They can read you. They can pick up on it pretty quickly. Can't fake the funk very long, because you're going to be tested. Sometimes intentionally and sometimes not. Being again in that space where they could see us every day, they could assess us, they could measure us, they could grade us. Making sure I had people who could pass those tests was really, really important.